Elden Ring offers many different builds and items with its vast open world. You can make crazy bleed or magic builds by traveling to dozens of different locations. But what if I told you that you don't need any of that? All the equipment you need is provided to you with the starting island. And I don't mean the starting class material, I mean specifically the island known as Precipice of Anticipation. So what are the rules? I can only use the items from the starting island, meaning no great runes, no armor, and no other consumables. And that's it. Let's see how this goes. So this is probably the hardest part of the entire run if I'm going to be honest, besides some late game bosses. If I want to get the equipment from this island, then I have to actually kill the grafted Psychon, and this boss is strictly made to have the players, new or old, purposely die. You were supposed to learn the mechanic of dying is part of the game, and how you're supposed to come back and kill this boss when you have better gear. This can be proven by the fact that you don't even get the Aztec flasks during this fight. You collect them after death, so I can't heal at all while fighting this guy. I could die and then come back to the island with the flasks, but I thought the video would be more entertaining if I did it. I can take maybe a few hits, but I had to kill this boss at a nearly hitless rate. Because of that, getting in light mode and baiting out the punishable attacks was my best solution. I died quite a lot, and every time I died I had to make a whole new run, so this boss was definitely a little aggravating to say the least. But a lot of attacks are punishable, and the Unsheathed Ash of War deals pretty amazing damage. The fight I actually killed him in took a while, but it was finally done after many attempts. Now with my new gear, I had to unequip every other item I had on. Currently on the island, there is nothing at the moment I can grab, and just to be sure, I checked the whole place. The only thing I could find was this message. There is another thing I can get, but just not now. You have to come back to the island for it, which I will do later in the video. As of right now, it just says the door is blocked shut. Oh wait, no, there's some butterflies I can just grab right over. Yeah. There's no other way off the island than death, so of course Elden Ring would trick you into figuring that out. After getting some mandatory things like Torrent, Golden Seed, Sacred Tears, I headed to the 4 Balefires. Luckily for me, there is a non-guarded chest with an imbued sword key. There are many teleporters that the key lets you use, one of them leading right back to the starting island. Arriving back, you can finally grab the butterflies that the game used to trick you. I never realized that these guys spawn a different location to give you the satisfaction of gaining your reward. To be fair, they are really useless for this run, but still. More importantly, the door that was previously blocked shut is now open. The first item you gain is the Stormhawk Cane. This is really useless for us. It's a key item that lets you progress Nefeli's questline. What I really came back here for is the Stormhawk Dean Spirit Ash. This guy isn't necessarily the best summon. To be fair, I dislike summons because they can interrupt the flow that I'm used to when fighting a boss. But this guy does give you a small strength buff immediately after being summoned, making him much more useful than to just draw aggro from enemies. Returning back to the mainland, I'm finally ready to fight Margit. You should know, I upgraded my weapon earlier so the damage I dealt on this boss and a few others was very good. Later the damage decreased, but this fight with Margit was very easy. The Spirit Ash was really nice here. It hardly got hit and stayed alive for the whole fight due to my constant aggression to the boss. After getting the stagger, this boss was defeated shortly after. Before fighting Godric, I grabbed the Dragon Crest Shield Talesman. This time, the Spirit Ash wasn't so lucky. The poor thing was killed immediately into the fight. The good news is I still got the physical damage buff. Godric wasn't always an easy boss for me when I was playing Elden Ring for the first time, as Elden Ring is my first Souls game. After beating him many times though, he's pretty straightforward. It's all about distance. Stay far enough to be able to avoid his axe swings, but stay close enough to trigger the jump attack when he makes a tornado. Phase 2 was easy, but to be fair, I've never fought him in Phase 2 with a weapon that deals somewhat small amount of damage. All this meant was I had to dodge some attacks that I forgot even existed. It didn't end up being a problem though. I got hit a few times, but I killed Godric on my first attempt.
I am the Lord of all that is golden.
It's time for the Red Wolf of Radagon. This boss has no health whatsoever, so it's a pretty easy fight. However, I do have a smaller amount of HP, and this boss attacks very quickly, so I have to be careful. I only got hit one time, so it's fair to say this fight went really well. Rennala's first phase went really well because I was able to kill her in just one rotation. I honestly don't think I've ever done that before, but before I grabbed Somber 5 and 6 to upgrade my weapon, which is why it was absolutely destroying her health. Phase 2 was even better. I summoned the Stormhawk Ash, and Rennala only got to summon once. She was killed in seconds. Next up is the Draconic Tree Sentinel. This boss gets a little bit easier for me every time I defeat him, but that doesn't mean he isn't a challenge. He definitely defines a part of the game where bosses actually get some health and deal a lot of damage. This boss is still no big deal if you've fought him many times. It took me about 3 times to get him, but I do want to highlight a perfect example of why I dislike spirit summons. It's not because I think they are cheating or anything. I remember depending on Mimic Tier for the first time when I played the game. The only thing is they can interrupt the flow of the fight. For example, right here, I staggered the boss. I was about to get the free hit until the Spirit Ash knocked the enemy back into action and I got hit for a bunch of damage. So to be completely honest, even though the summon helps, I really just wanted to use him because he's from the starting island and it fits perfectly with the challenge. But yeah, I killed the boss after some time. Now it's time to fight the ghost version of Godfrey. A funny thing that happened in this fight, one of the tree guardians nearly got in the boss arena and kinda got stuck in the fog gate. This distracted my summon for the entire fight, but I doubt the summon would have lasted a long time anyways. This fight is much easier than the real Godfrey fight, so I wasn't worried. I ended up getting a stagger, and I was still at the part of the run where I dealt good damage. It's safe to say that this was one of the easiest fights of the run. Godfrey down. It's time to beat Morgott. I think he's one of the most forgettable main story bosses in the game. He's a little more of a challenge, don't get me wrong. I still deal pretty good damage to this boss, but I also die in 2 or 3 hits. This boss has a lot of punishing attacks, and the Golden Tempering Ash of War made my jump attack great for punishing them. It also usually gave me enough time to attack and still dodge the next swing from Morgott. Second phase is more difficult because the boss becomes very aggressive and attacks you as much as possible. However, this was probably one of the first times where I mastered how to dodge the grab attack. This opens up more windows to deal damage, so that definitely helped a lot. After some time and around 5 attempts, I killed the boss. Next is Fire Giant. I usually like to fight this boss with a weapon that builds up bleed. That makes the second phase go by a lot quicker when the bleed procs, because the bleed deals percentage damage. But obviously, I don't have access to a bleed weapon. I didn't have a plan going into this fight other than to just stay on my horse and keep slashing at the boss's ankle. This is what I usually do with a bleed weapon, so I hoped that it would work out for this fight as well. And it did. I beat this guy in my first attempt. The only attack that I was worried about was the fire breathing attack, and I knew for a fact I would have to come across it considering how long this fight would take. But despite the weird fire physics in the game, I survived. Before I move on to Godskin Duo, would you believe me if I told you there's still another item from the starting island? I completed Vari's questline to get the Somber Stone 10. I let myself use upgrades because Vari's questline involves the starting island. You can dye the white cloth that it gives you with the first maiden that you see in the beginning room. I just thought I'd add that detail because it's another item from the starting island. I also grabbed the Ritual Sword Talesman for some extra damage and the Opaline Heart Tier for some physical damage negation. Now it's time for Godskin Duo. Usually I put both bosses to sleep, then I charged the attack for my weapon as much as it can be charged to get an amazing amount of damage. I couldn't actually do this with the starting weapon when I used Golden Tempering. This is because that attack sends a flurry of smaller attacks instead of one big charged attack. This wouldn't deal the kind of damage that I wanted. But if you just tap the heavy attack and refuse to charge it, your character will keep hitting the boss with a smaller attack that still deals more damage compared to the flurries. This can also stagger the skinny one, so it was the overall best choice. Looking back, I could have just not used Golden Tempering because then I could still charge the attack, but I like to believe that the option I went with was still better because it took away at least half of one of the Godskin's HP. Malekith is next, and I absolutely love this fight. Well, the second phase. The first phase is a lot harder to me. I think that's just because I haven't practiced it as much as I usually get him to transition into his second phase really quickly. I started to think that this fight would be really hard when I kept getting hit in the first phase. I was just burning through all my flasks. The good thing is that 90% of the time, both my swords will hit the boss during an attack, and that deals double the damage. It's always a good thing to keep trying if you're in a bad attempt at a fight, because I actually beat Malekith on my first try. The second phase is really easy once you know how to dodge all his attack patterns. This was good because I had already used so many healing flasks during the first phase. The fight ended pretty quickly. One quick side note, I killed Radahn and Mimicked here for some upgrades for my summon. I was super overleveled, so both fights were really easy, but I thought I'd mention it. And now I had to fight Gideon, but unfortunately the footage got corrupted. I thought I would just talk about it with some other footage in the background, so here it is. I find it absolutely hilarious that it took me more tries to beat Gideon compared to Fire Giant and Malekith combined. Yep, I died to Gideon 2 times. I think I was just being reckless, because on the third try, I just put more thought into dodging rather than attacking, and then I was able to kill him. Now I can show my actual footage again. Sorry about that. Time to fight Godfrey. I think it's completely reasonable to think that the first phase is more difficult than the second phase, but with the kind of weapon I was using, one that doesn't have a lot of reach, the second phase appeared to be more challenging. Because of this, I decided to wait and use my summon for the second phase. This left just Godfrey and I on the battlefield for the first phase. I've never fought this guy with no armor, let alone the past few bosses. During my recent challenge runs, I've been able to use armor for at least Fire Giant and beyond. This meant I had to get used to the fact that I would take an excessive amount of damage. So I had to time my rolls as well as I could while still getting some hits in. Eventually, I got him to transition into a second phase. Immediately, I ran back and healed. Then I waited for the perfect time to use my summon. After that, it was a matter of being completely aggressive. I wanted to get as much damage as I could while my summon was still alive. And once Godfrey got staggered, it was pretty much game over for him. Now it's time for the last fight, which is the only fight that I like to say nothing about. Here's how that went. I want to thank everyone who made it this far into the video. All the recent support has meant so much to me, thank you guys. It's all great motivation to start completing some of the runs that you guys have been mentioning. But anyways, I'll see you in the next one.